Part 5 continues with Chapter 19, The Royal House of Athens. And we have an illustration of a from the waist up man, and he's, holding in his left hand a scepter with like a, it's not really a fleur-de-lis, but it's a three together sort of tipped wand, but long-tailed like crocodile thing, but it's just a pointy tail. I have taken the Procne and Philomela story from Ovid. He tells it better than anyone else, but even so, he is sometimes inconceivably bad. He describes in 15 long lines, which I admit, exactly how Philomela's tongue was cut out and what it looked like as it lay palpitating on the earth where Tyrgeus had flung it. I thought that could be one of the most interesting things of the whole thing. Add a few pages here and there, when you have a 352-page book, you can make it 10 pages longer to include all these things. The Greek poets were not given to such details, but the Latin had no manner of objection to them. I have followed Ovid too, for the most part, in the stories of Procne and Orthaia, taking a few details from Apollodorus, the tale of Creusa and Ion is the subject of a play of Euripides, one of the many plays in which he tried to show the Athens what the entities of the myths really were when judged by ordinary human standards of mercy, honor, and self-control. Greek mythology was full of stories such as that of the rape of Europa, in which never a suggestion was allowed that the entity in question had acted somewhat less than divinely. In his version of the story of Creusa, Euripides said to his audience, "Look at your Apollo, ye sun-bright lord of the lyre, the pure god of truth." This is what he did. He brutally forced a helpless young girl, and then he abandoned her. The end of Greek mythology was at hand when such plays drew full houses in Athens. This family was especially marked, even among other remarkable mythological families, by the very peculiar happenings which visited its members. There is nothing stranger told in any story than some of the events in their lives. Now, that's part of why Christianity, I guess, replaced some of these things, because it said, well, ours is totally just and all that. Well, sacrificing your own son, I don't know about that, but, typically the Christian, like, father god entity is like a rapist or something, and some of those things were lifted from the story, or not included when they decided to compose their story. Cecrops, the first king of Attica, was named Cecrops. He had no human ancestor, and he was himself only half human. Cecrops, lord and hero, born of a dragon-shaped below, he was the person usually held to be responsible for Athena's becoming the protector of Athens. Poseidon, too, wanted the city, and to show how great a benefactor he could be, he struck upon the rock of the Acropolis with his trident, so that the salt water leaped forth from the cleft and subsided into a deep well. But Athena did still better. She made an olive tree grow there, the most prized of all of the trees of Greece. The gray gleaming olive Athena showed to men, the glory of shining Athens, her crown from on high. In return for this good gift, Cecrops, who had been made arbiter, decided that Athens was hers. Poseidon was greatly angered and punished the people by sending a disastrous flood. In one story of this contest between the two entities, women's suffrage plays a part. In those early days, we are told, women voted as well as men. All the women voted for the female entity, all the men for the male entity. Well, that, there's still people with that problem. There was one more woman than there were men, so Athena won. But the men, along with Poseidon, were greatly chagrined at this female triumph, and while Poseidon proceeded to flood the land, the men decided to take the vote away from the women. Nevertheless, Athena kept Athens. Most writers say that these events happened before the deluge, and that the Cecrops, who belonged to the famous Athenian family, was not the ancient half-dragon, half-human creature, but an ordinary man, important only because of his relatives. He was the son of a distinguished king, a nephew of two well-known mythological heroines, and the brother of three. Above all, he was the great-grandfather of Athens' hero, Theseus. His father, King Arctheus of Athens, was usually said to be the king in whose reign Demeter came to Eleusis, and agriculture began. He had two sisters, Procne and Philomela, noted for their misfortunes. Their story was tragic in the extreme. Procne and Philomela. And before I get into that, one of the things about voting and other such things that would prove, equality, not equity, equality. And one of the advantages that a female would naturally have is that hitting puberty 2-3 years earlier than males, you end up, on average, I guess the age, varies per area, but I would not think that, it's early puberty disorder. I'm not saying that, but independent morality and the ability to choose upon that, as far as what one's resources are, is something that naturally occurs at puberty, so therefore the voting age would be a couple of years earlier or something like that. But it shouldn't really be an age. It should be an age as a minimum, and then, that they're sane enough or something. But still, the female would get it at an earlier age than the male. Procne, the elder of the two, was married to Tereus of Thrace, a son of Ares, who proved to have inherited all his father's detestable qualities. The two had a son, Etis, and when he was 5 years old, Procne, who had all this while been living in Thrace, separated from her family, begged Tereus to let her invite her sister Philomela to visit her. He agreed and said he would go to Athens himself and escort her, but as soon as he set eyes on the girl, he fell in love with her. She was beautiful as a nymph or a naiad. He easily persuaded her father to allow her to go back with him. She herself was happy beyond words at the prospect. All went well on the voyage, but when they disembarked and started overland for the palace, Tereus told Philomela that he had received news of Procne's death, and he forced her into a pretended marriage. Within a very short time, however, she learned the truth, and she was ill-advised enough to threaten him. She would surely find means to let the world know what he had done, she told him, and he would be an outcast among men. She aroused both his fury and his fear. He seized her and cut out her tongue. Then he left her in a strongly guarded place and went to Procne with the story that Philomela had died on the journey. Philomela's case looked hopeless. She was shut up. She could not speak. In those days there was no writing. It seemed that Tereus was safe. However, although people could not write, they could tell a story without speaking, because they were marvelous craftsmen, such as had never been known since. A smith could make a shield which showed on its surface a lion hunt, 2 lions devouring a bull, while herdsmen urged their dogs on to attack them. Or he could depict a harvest scene, a field with reapers and sheaf-binders, and a vineyard teeming with clusters of grapes which youths and maidens gathered into baskets, while one of them played on a shepherd's pipe to cheer their labors. The women were equally remarkable in their kind of work. They could weave into the lovely stuffs they made forms so lifelike that anyone could see what tale they illustrated. Philomela accordingly turned to her loom. She had a greater motive to make clear the story she wove than any artist ever had. With infinite pains and surpassing skill, she produced a wondrous tapestry on which the whole account of her wrongs was unfolded. She gave it to the old woman who attended her, and signified that it was for the queen.